My first meeting with Shreela took place in the House of Lords in 1990, shortly after her introduction there. I had just made my maiden speech, and she was kind enough to give me encouragement, after which we soon became firm friends. It was obvious to me straight away how genuinely Shreela felt the privilege of being a member of the upper house, and how delighted she was to find herself amongst a group of people who made her feel welcome and who treated her from the outset as an equal. Never before had the chamber of the House of Lords witnessed a woman in a sari. And with her natural approachability, Shreela soon became someone whom people wanted to meet and to know. She, in turn, swiftly warmed to her fellow peers, finding them stimulating company, especially the hereditary peers, whom she regarded as the embodiment of old-fashioned British values and manners. People's values and their standards, the standards of behaviour, mattered increasingly to Shreela in a world where she saw those things being gradually eroded or otherwise changing for the worse. As the first ever Asian female peer, Shreela soon made the most of her unique status in the House, enriching its debates with insights gained from her Indian heritage and experience. And then one day, in 1996, she had an inspired idea, which was to organise a group visit to India, coinciding with the celebrations to mark the country's 50th anniversary of independence, planned for the following year. The group would consist solely of hereditary peers, who were the descendants of former viceroys of India. 7 or 8 members of the nobility, plus wives and partners, including Lord Ridley, Lord Elgin, Countess Mountbatten, the Earl of Lytton, Lord Lawrence, the Marquis of Reading, and Lady Darcy de Nath, duly signed up. Lord Lytton, who is here today, remembers the expedition with enormous pleasure. Shreela took delight in shepherding the illustrious party to a succession of receptions, official meetings, and dinners where they were treated like royalty. To her great amusement, a collective noun in Urdu was settled upon for the group. The word Lat Sahab, which means firstly, Governor General, and secondly, one who swaggers. The next year, back at home, things took a less happy turn. In 1998, Tony Blair's government introduced the House of Lords Bill to remove all the hereditary peers from the upper house. Lord Cranborne, the Conservative leader in the Lords, did a secret deal with number 10 to ensure that 92 hereditaries of all parties and of none would, after all, be allowed to stay behind. William Hague, the leader of the opposition, promptly sacked him. Shreela was so upset at Cranborne's removal that she resigned the Conservative Party whip. With some cajoling, she was persuaded to change her mind. But she was sad and would say dejectedly that her friends on the Conservative benches had all gone. At the same time, ever since her elevation to the peerage, Shreela had harboured an expectation that the Conservative leadership would want to use her experience by appointing her to a public position. But no such call had ever come. The disappointment weighed on her, and in 2008, she decided to resign the Conservative whip for good and move to the politically neutral status of the crossbenches. In retrospect, I think this move was a good thing for Shreela. For one thing, it left her freer to say what she wanted without looking over her shoulder. And it also enabled her to take up a role that might never have come her way, which was to chair the committee responsible for the funding and construction of the memorial gates on Constitution Hill, dedicated to the memory of soldiers from the British Empire and the colonies who gave their lives in 2 world wars. I know of no one who regards these gates as anything other than a triumph. And I would personally view them, as I think Shreela did herself, as the greatest achievement of her life. She always modestly insisted that the success of the project was down to many others, not only her. But she would nevertheless acknowledge that without her, the initiative would never have got off the ground. Shreela was a person who did not beat about the bush. When she needed to make a point, she would shoot from the hip. But being direct with people was Shreela's way. She saw no point in being anything else. When she spoke in the House, she would typically give it to their lordships with both barrels. As a result, listening to Shreela, depending on the subject, could be something of a white-knuckle ride. Let her loose on a topic such as political correctness, and you might find yourself holding on to your seat. How ridiculous and stupid is that, is a phrase one often heard. Shreela's approach to life and to politics was always good-humoured, but there were numerous issues which she took very seriously, and 2 in particular which she championed in the last decade of her life. One was a cause that sprang directly from some difficult and upsetting experiences when out with Gary, which was access to public spaces such as theatres and restaurants. The other was much bigger, and perhaps an abiding concern of her life, which was the empowerment of women. In a Lord's debate almost exactly 10 years ago, she began her speech by saying, "These days, I do not cry very much because I am quite a happy person. The only thing that makes me tearful is thinking about the nearly 1 billion women in India and Africa whose lives are beyond imagination." Shreela was passionate about the things that she knew would improve those lives, chief among them education, paid work, and access to family planning. Of these, education she saw as the key, and in the Lords she lost no opportunity of driving these important messages home. Shreela was the warmest and kindest of friends, and to be in her company was to guarantee a great deal of laughter. She had little time for people who took themselves too seriously. My wife and I visited her and Gary in Maidenhead quite frequently, and from time to time in London, she and I would have a cheerful gossip at one of her favourite Indian restaurants. Shreela never let her ennobled position affect her dealings with others, but she used it effectively, and in standing up for the disadvantaged, the dispossessed, the unfairly treated, and those who in one way or another are victims of oppression, she was speaking the language that most of us want to hear, which is the language of justice. In a debate on justice some years ago, she ended her speech with a little story. She said, "I had the great good fortune to have as a friend the mother of the distinguished judge, Lord Phillips of Worth-Matravers. One state opening day, I came into the chamber very near where all the judges were sitting. First, an old friend, the noble and learned Lord Wolfe, got up to greet me. And then the noble and learned Lord Phillips. By the time I got to a seat, one of the peers said to me, "We thought maybe all the judges were going to stand up to greet you." Well, indeed, I personally believe that they would have been proud to do so. Thank you.